We need to save the planet. We need to save the planet. We've all heard this before, so many times. But you're probably wondering, why do we need to save the planet? I think saving the planet is a very arrogant statement by humans. We're not here to save the planet. In fact, we need to save ourselves. It's a pretty arrogant statement, I agree. And the decisive factor in the course of human history is to change our approach towards the meaning of life. There are millions of dollars being spent in research and innovation to find alternatives to materials and systems, but most importantly, doing damage control. Just under the head of climate finance, the World Bank Group delivered a $31.7 billion last year. That's a 20% increase from the previous year, which was already the highest ever spent. Economic losses from extreme heat averaged a 1.5% of GDP per capita for the world's wealthiest nations. And for the world's lowest income groups, that percent was 6.5. Now, all this is all jargon, and it sounds like a pretty scary future. But I wanted to share an anecdote from my childhood, when things were hopeful and happy. I am Chaitsi Ahuja. I come from a happy and healthy Punjabi family. I grew up in Ahmedabad, studied at the university just across the road, and lived with 16 people in a house. Growing up, I was fascinated by stories, so I'm quite excited that I'm giving you a story today. My grandfather would tell me stories about migrating from Pakistan to save their lives during the 1947 partition. He survived the manslaughter in moving trains across the newly made India-Pakistan border. He also spent his early teens in refugee camps and selling balloons and cloths to make a living. On the other hand, my grandmother, who also went through the same trauma, would tell me stories about mythological characters from the Ramayana, Gita and Mahabharata. I think that helped her survive her childhood trauma and understand right from wrong, gave her a conscience, gave her a moral science. And in hindsight, all the stories I remember had somehow plants and trees in them. She learnt Gurumukhi under a big banyan tree and also ate tulsi leaves because she couldn't afford to go to a doctor when she had a cold. And funnily enough, they ate mangoes to celebrate an occasion. I was amazed by how, despite all this trauma and loss in their lives, nature's fruits was such a big part of the celebration and their healing. And this wasn't too long ago, just a few decades. Both of them, I thought, were pretty badass in how they not just survived this trauma, but also thrived in navigating the oppressive system of caste, creed, and capitalism. To be truly honest, I think their motivation in life was not to make so much money, but to really be happy and content, have a great, happy family. And the history of our people has a big role to play in who we become when we grow up. Just the way today, algorithms feed up on past data to predict the future. And just like these human-coded algorithms, our world is a complex, interconnected web of possibilities. And everything is connected. Did you know that trees can influence the rotation of the earth? Did you also know that wolves can alter the course of a river? Or that earthworms could control the wild bear population? I didn't know that. I was quite amazed when I read it. But did you also know that humans were the reason why the Earth's temperature is rising? We've already increased the Earth's temperature by 1%, 1 degree, and we only have half a degree left to be able to be compatible with this planet. So really, are we saving the planet or are we saving ourselves? That's the question I ask myself a lot. And by now, you might also have realized that I'm the kind of person who wakes up in the middle of the night, freaks out about a climate action problem or a forest fire. This sounds like a little crazy, but actually this fear is real. This is what researchers are calling climate anxiety, and eco-anxiety. I was diagnosed with climate anxiety 4 years ago, and to date, the only thing that brings me calm is a walk in the park or cleaning up the beach. One such beach cleanup, I found myself with a pack of chips from just a week ago. It had the manufacturing date. And I also found myself with a pack of milk from 10 years ago. That was also the time when I was working at Future Group, which is India's largest retailer, and FMCG goods, which were multi-layered packaging goods, was something that I would deal in and promote as a marketing manager. And when I stood there in the middle of the sand with the 2 packets in my hand, I instantly was in shock. And in that shock, I realized that I don't want to contribute to any more waste in this world. And that's when my journey began. That was 5 years ago. I started something called the Buy Nothing Project. And the Buy Nothing Project basically means that you don't buy anything unless it's absolutely necessary and is a need for your survival. And I specifically focused on clothing as a problem statement because I realized that I had hoarded a lot of clothes over the years. Yes, my dad's in textiles and we've got lots of clothes lying at home. So I said, okay, let's start with a 6-month challenge. Let's see how far I go. I successfully was able to live without new clothes for 5 years. And in the 5 years, I also managed to buy only stuff that I absolutely needed or needed to upgrade onto something that was of better quality. This was also the time where I was reading up obsessively about sustainability and the climate crisis. I spent time in China understanding factory workers, understanding their motivations and what their worldview is like. I also spent a lot of time in stock rooms and grocery stores with people who were trying to sell product. Buy 3, get 5 free, buy 2, get 1 free. And in these two starkly different but very, very similar environments, I saw so much waste that I could get the shivers. And that was the reason of my climate anxiety. I decided to start living without plastic. And plastic is something that I think is a beautiful material. I think it has a great adaptability to our lifestyles. But I also think that it's something that needs to be used only when absolutely necessary. It was invented to replace piano keys because back in the day, piano keys were made from enamel of elephant tusks. And so it was actually a replacement of being cruelty free. But over time, because of our needs of invariable exponential growth and development, plastic became a material that everyone wanted to go to. It was cheap, it was part of crude extraction process, so people thought, hey, it's a zero waste ingredient and material, so let's start applying this wherever possible. The problem with the use of plastic is that it's used in everything. It's in every object around you. It's in our bodies, it's in our bloodstreams, it's in our water streams. And now we're getting cancer because of it. I've had 2 people in my family who've had cancer, and it's not something you want to see some loved one go through. So how do you tackle this problem? Is it really possible to live without plastic? Well, that's the question I asked myself and said, is it possible? I created a framework called the Brown Lens. The Brown Lens looks at every object in our daily lives from a very, very specific circularity and sustainability lens. And sustainability is a very complex, large, vague word. What does it mean? Sustainability for me really means how do we leave this earth better than we found it and not in our lifetime, in our consumption cycles, not harm anything in the process. And that includes people, species, as well as the planet. And if you do all of those three, you also actually do stuff that's good for you. So, sounded like a pretty good cause to start working for. And the Brown Lens evolved itself into a 5-step framework. It looks at 5 key parameters. Source basically looks at what is the product made of, how is it made, who makes it. The second is the method. What is the production process? How much waste is generated? How much energy is consumed in making that product? The third is packaging. 68% of India's landfill waste consists of post-consumer packaging. And that's pretty sad. You might have all heard stories about straws, about polythene bags, of how you need to carry your own bottle. But really, how many Amazon packages do we all get in our homes today? And for a simple small object, you get layers and layers of bubble wrap and in a huge box. All of that has a footprint. We also need to start looking at not just profits in companies. We need to start looking at objects and material footprints beyond carbon footprints. So how do we start doing that? The Brown Lens exactly allows us to evaluate those parameters. So the third I talked about was packaging. The fourth is a very important step in evaluating a product, which is life and beyond. So you've made a great product with a natural material, it's got great packaging, it can be reused or recycled or composted, but where does it actually end up? We've seen in landfills, people have mixed wet and dry waste. So to give you an example, this blazer, if this had a plastic shirt and I would have just thrown it in the bin, this plastic button would have not composted itself for over 800 years, we all know that. But if a compostable material is mixed with a non-compostable material, it actually releases insane amounts of methane. And that's the reason why our landfills stink. If any of you have actually been to a landfill, you will know that it's a life-changing experience. Your body starts to reject everything around you. You get a headache, you get very uncomfortable, you want to throw up because there is just so much smell and such strong chemicals around you. And all of that is purely because we've not segregated at source and we've not cleaned products at source. So that's the packaging parameter. The fifth parameter is a very crucial one in my opinion. It's called aesthetics. And by aesthetics, we mean the design of the product, the design of the object. Most people design great products, but they forget to look at the design of it. And by design, I mean form, function. Is it useful? Does it actually solve a problem for a person? And there are many historians and researchers who talk about design thinking, human-centered design. But really we need to look at design from a circularity point of view. Can the same raw material, if designed well, be brought back into that production cycle? Which means you take less resources from the ecosystems. So that's about the Brown Lens. And the Brown Lens actually became the central point from which we curate products at Brown Living. It is the holy grail of our evaluation methods. Everything that you see on the platform is pre-evaluated, pre-verified with that in mind. If something doesn't tick all the boxes of all the 5 parameters, we actually work with these artisan groups and sustainable businesses to help them be more sustainable. And this can really be applied in any walk of life. We worked with architects, we worked with people who work in water management systems, we worked with corporates, we worked with real assembly line production people who can really apply this framework to anything and everything possible. And here, I think my key takeaway to give you guys is, really start evaluating your consumption habits, because if we continue to consume mindlessly through our lives, we're actually taking more from the ecosystems, we're taking more from this planet than we can actually give back. So really, I think the underlying thought in my last point to you would be, shop only when you need, buy only what you need, and when you do, try to buy sustainable, because that not just empowers people and communities that work in this space, but it also makes you feel like you're contributing something back to the earth. And if you do that, you're only extending your own lifetime. So be a little selfish. Don't be greedy, but be a little selfish in extending your life on this planet. Thank you. I'm Chaitsi.